work, one whole day to play. Come on, everybody, wear your roller skates today. It's Saturday, 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 it's Saturday, Saturday, it's Saturday, Saturday, it's Saturday, yeah.
Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of Career Exploration Saturday. I'm your host, Ebony Tyler. I have real conversations with real people about real jobs. Happy New Year! The first career conversation of 2021 is with Qiana and Mickie. Qiana is a Bronx native. She is a speaker. She is an activist, and she is a food systems leader. Qiana breaks down what being an activist is to her. It's not just protesting in the streets. It's about policy and infiltration. All right, let's jump right into my conversation with Qiana and Mickie. Welcome, Qiana. Welcome to Career Exploration Saturday. I am so glad to have you here with us today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So, we like to start all of our conversations. Tell us who Qiana was at 16. Did you have it all together? Did you know what you wanted to be?
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah. Okay. Woo. Okay. Qiana is 16. So, Qiana is 16. Qiana is 16. I knew I wanted to go to college. I knew I wanted to go away. Interesting enough, I was interested in saving the planet and starting to get into environmental stuff. Which I guess parlays into like my career now, but did not have that connection back then. But I always kind of tried to stay active, social, volunteered. But I think I also wanted to connect in different ways and people. And I, still was quite insecure. I was insecure about being, kind of a nerd and not being like having a mix of who I was. Like, I think I still was not on that road. So much of me came from my family and my family's history and, my cousins who I very much looked up to at the time. And I think I was still finding myself. But I think going to an all-girls school, going to an all-girl Catholic school was a really good place to still have a safe place to start exploring that. So I think I was at the early stages of that.
So right after high school, did you go straight to college since you always knew you wanted to go to college?
Yes, I went straight, and my birthday's in December. So, and I started school early in kindergarten. So I was pretty much like a year ahead in some ways, always in school. So yeah, I went to school a little bit early and went right after. And I went to Hampton University in Hampton, Virginia, which is where my mom started her college career. That's not where she graduated, but that's where she started. That's where my parents met, actually, too.
Oh, you're the second person I know whose parents met at an HBCU. Now, do you have like a long legacy of attending HBCUs?
Yes, actually I do. My mom's side of the family, my it starts with my great-grandmother. My great-grandmother was a teacher in Columbia, South Carolina, and went back to school for her degree. And I have her two diplomas. I have her high school diploma and her college diploma on my wall. My grandparents on my mom's side we're both from South Carolina. They met at Benedict. My great-grandmother went to Benedict. And then eventually my mom went there and graduated from there. So that is 1, 2, 3 generations. I'm the 4th generation HBCU. My son's the 5th generation to go to college. My grandfather went to Benedict and then also got his master's from NYU, a master's in arts later on when he moved up to New York.
Wow.
Fun fact.
That's pretty dope. I like that. And when we hang up, I'm going to talk to you about Columbia, South Carolina.
Oh, yeah.
Hampton.
Yes.
What you majoring at Hampton? And tell us a little bit about your time at Hampton, because I love HBCUs.
Yes. I majored in marketing, And the reason why was I was, like I said, a nerd. But I also loved pop culture growing up. And so even at 16, like that was something very deep in me, like a love of music, a love of TV, uh, shows, movies, and stuff. And I think marketing came from my cousin going into school and saying like she did marketing. She was always so like fashionable and cool. And you know, in TV, and you look at like Essence and Ebony growing up, it always looked like the business job to do, and it looked like the slightly creative one, like not accounting. So I didn't know what I was doing, but I majored in marketing. And my time in Hampton was interesting. I think probably typical, like some folks, and maybe atypical for others. Like I think growing up in the Bronx and then going down to Virginia for school was a definite culture shock. I think even though I went to a Catholic school and went to Catholic school all my life, my school was, I think being in an all-girls school created an empowerment zone, if you will, around young women and feminism in a way that maybe wasn't as like say rebellious, but definitely supportive and encouraging. So I think being of a certain age and having a very like progressive mom, being outspoken or growing into being outspoken, going down like below the DC line for school was like a wake up call. And being, you know, of a certain age and being down south, it was also a wake up call. So I think I learned a lot about myself around race and the nuance of race, but also like class and gender. And I don't think that was like what was on my card for when I started, but definitely something it broadened up when I got there. So I feel like my time in Hampton was just interesting. It's taken me, you know, like maybe a full perspective to kind of really ground myself and how enriching it was. But also, I think some of the hardships and barriers that I came across also helped shape me into the person that I am now, and somehow inform, like, not just me as a young woman, you know, now older, but also the things that I really fight for and advocate for. Because I think I definitely found my voice in college. I think, you know, in high school, I think I was probably still quite someone who slightly pushed on boundaries, but very much went with the rules. I didn't break rules. I did detention once, and that was because I didn't get my report card signed in time. You know, like I didn't break curfew. I didn't play hooky, you know, and at the same time, when I saw things that were wrong and inequitable, I was still trying to learn how to build that voice. And I think when I was in college, there were things that were coming up in dynamics that I started to put a voice to. And I think it just became like an evolution of that. And I think being in Hampton helped that, because there was just an experience of Blackness, an experience of culture, an experience of being independent, having to find out what makes me me, that started there. And what I don't want. You know, I think those were things that I just never had a chance to like explore until I was at Hampton. And it just looked really different than if I had stayed in New York.
Wow.
Or went to another college.
Okay. So I like that you keep bringing up your social activism environment, because you are a speaker and activist and a food systems leader.
Yes.
What the heck is a food systems leader?
It's a lot of things, and yet still hard to describe. But I think it can mean a lot of, it means a lot of things to a lot of different people. But I think for me, food systems, I focus on the path of like food going from farm to fork, as some folks say, or farm to community, as I prefer. And within that, it's like not just the supply chain of food, but it's like the environmental stewardship of food, the human component, the labor of food, the why of food. Like, why does this food get subsidized? Why does this food come in abundance? And why do some of these other foods not? It also intersects with like policy, and more I've tried to connect it to social, cultural, and economic wealth and health as well. So it's like looking at not just food as one thing, but the intersection of food. And I try to approach my food systems work on dismantling increasing equity, racial, economic, and environmental, but definitely trying to use food as a driver of change to dismantle inequity.
Wow, that was a lot.
There's a lot, right? Definitely not something that I thought when I was in college that I would be doing. And, you know, I've been in this field. So I've been doing food justice work, social justice work for a little over 10 years, maybe closer to 12 now. And 14 years ago, even 13 and a half, I literally was not sure what I should be doing and where I should be going. When I graduated college, I thought I was on the track to Gap corporate. Like, I wanted to work in management, you know, get that coach briefcase. And so the trajectory of that to here, very different.
Wow, you want to share a little bit about it?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think when, you know, something I started to realize in Hampton was the differences, the differences around,
New York City.
yeah, New York. I started to see the nuance in an intersection around race and class and power. And I didn't have the framework, and I didn't have like the concepts to really describe it, but it was definitely something, the push and pull and tension I was feeling. The differences between like what my experience was versus, you know, another classmate versus somebody else, like the affluence, like why is there such a big spectrum of that? Getting out of school, I had my son right after school, and I think it also opened the door to me having to see the world in a different way, because it was no longer me as an individual. It was like, how do I make a way for myself that will make a way for my son? And I started to see or feel a little bit more of the inequity of coming back to New York, and I just started to see things in a different lens. And then I think in terms of jobs too, and just how folks of color were, you know, impacted in the workplace, the opportunities that were afforded. Before I got into nonprofit work, I worked at development. Well, before my food justice work in nonprofits, I worked at a school by chance in development. So I think having more community-based work right after school really kind of helped me to see the sharp inequities beyond just my individual experience. And seeing and being a mother of a very early child and still being young myself, being able to see how this inequity was impacting youth, and having that be a concern of mine, an immediate concern of mine. So it wasn't something down the block, it was something I was living with right now in the midst of trying to figure out what I was going to do for a living. And so I think that kind of really helped shape the lens, or started to grow my lens around wanting to build community-driven solutions to inequities, knowing that we all deserve, and the segregation of resources is what keeps us apart, not these social constructs. So the more I got into the work, the more I started to learn about the framing. So it became less about an individual experience, but it was like, oh, some of what I'm experiencing is actually systemic, or the things that I know as a single mom that I never experienced before is persistent, it's systemic. And I want to change that. I think that's something that's always probably been in my background, is volunteering and wanting to change and asking, one too many questions, or not just always being given, being okay with what was given, like a narrative that's given, like wanting to push and challenge. So I think I was saying like I was a nerd, but I was a, an opinionated nerd.
So how do you change systems, right? Like how,
Yeah,
because you're in policy work, right? And
right.
why is it important that Black folks are part of the change in policy, bringing our lens to things, is to be able to create change in our community?
Yeah. I mean, I think the easiest, simplest answer is we live it should be something we inform because we live it. It impacts our daily life, even if it's not your job. Like this is the system, this is the government, this is the society that we live in. And some of what we're dealing with are social constructs, right? Just built. And some things are the other societal constructs that we supposedly all live and adhere by. So policy is the mechanism that implements those dynamics, those constructs. And so to me, and food kind of, I think helped me kind of hone in on something to use. And I think that's why I kind of stayed in the work of food and maybe shifted from my desire of entertainment or in the entertainment field, or my desire to just be in a nonprofit, was like food started to become a easier or a thing I can hone in on and then broaden and see the intersections of it. So it's food, access, healthcare, housing, income. Those are all intersectional, and there's policies around all of that on the community level, on the state level, national level, international level. So the more I understand, I mean, I think I always knew about policy. I think I always was interested in politics, but the more I got aware around food policy, the more I realized how few folks of color, at least in my early lens in the early part of the work, seem not present. And it also seemed like there are people like me who aren't a voice in this, and yes, it impacts us. So that became really an impetus for me to kind of connect policy to my food work. Some folks like grow, some folks are culinary folks. I'm more like policy fingers, like talking stuff. But I realized like I do have a skill that maybe I thought was marketing, which is actually probably around social connections and people. And I think my lens on understanding the macro to the micro and trying to break that down for anybody to understand, so we feel more power and we can connect to that power, I think is what drove me into the work more. And I think in terms of policy, it was like, I see way too many white men speaking for all of us, or tokenizing one or two Black women to speak for the others. And that's not me. That's not my voice. That's not my experience. And so I think that we all should have a way and a say. And so so policy to me, it's like it impacts us. Therefore, we should be, if we're the most impacted as folks of color, as historically or economically marginalized folks, right, however you fit into that, then we should be the ones that have the most decision-making power. We should be the most impacted, should have the most say. It should not be the other way around. So any system or any policy that supports that needs to be infiltrated and dismantled. And for me, I started to find that there are ways to do policy work that I don't have to be a policy wonk. I don't have to sit and write the bill that's 800 pages long to engage in policy. There's grassroots work, organizing. There's ways to build feasible ways to get a lived experience from the peoples to that bill. And there's work and connections in between to make that happen, whether it's training or advocacy or organizing or joining a campaign or talking, at certain tables to uplift the work and experience of others that are too busy doing the work or may not want to do this policy. How do we work together to do it? I found my place and voice in that. And I think wanting to see this inequity to be dismantled and be an active part of that, that's what keeps me engaged in policy and want other folks engaged, as much as it can be very frustrating and heartbreaking, and because it's so persistent. So I think for me, policy became a genuine way of, this is not just, I don't have to be a wonk to do this for a living, and I don't have to do it for a living in order for it to have impact. And my voice is as valuable and needed just because of who I am, being the same single Black mother, girl from the Bronx that I am. That influences policy, and I want other people to feel that same power, and so we can work together so we don't have policies that don't work for us. So if that means infiltrating an existing system, like looking like a passing light-skinned Black woman that people think is safe, to do that in order to bring in, again, to infiltrate, that's one way to do it. And bring in what is needed to be said and get to other tables. And at the same time, building an alternative system, an alternative policy, being informed by what else is there. So not just living in the existing systems, but for me, it's been wanting to also connect to how to build alternatives. Because you can't just say this is bad. And that's what I struggle a lot sometimes when people talk about politics. It's like they want to focus on just the existing and never move beyond the rhetoric into the what else. And I think we all have different strengths, but we need both. We can't just break this down and not figure out another way that works for us. It doesn't have to be a replicant of that system, capitalism or whatever. It can be what we build it, but we do need to build it.
Right. Now, speaking of building, can you tell us a little bit about your work at South Bronx Farmers Market and the Point CDC? And what I love is that you actually work and are actively trying to change the community that you're from. Because a lot of people, they leave.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah. So part of what I found was important and still is being really community based as much as possible. Okay. And that's where I come from. Like, I come from the Bronx. I live in Harlem now. This is my entry point to how I stay informed, how I, the frontline work. So I started to do work and continue to do work around food justice and social justice. And I worked my way through a grassroots organization. So I started running that as the executive director. And so our work was rooted in, policy and advocacy, and also connecting farmers, hyper-local farmers like community gardeners, to regional farmers, to community groups in the city to get healthy food access and choose the models that they wanted in their community. So seeing food again as a way of building like healthy communities, resilient communities, and just getting like good food and supporting the businesses and folks that you want to support in your neighborhood and in your land. So I do that for like a living, but part of me also feels like in order to do that well, I need to stay connected and I need to stay as active in the community as possible. So there are times when folks will ask me, as a leader, to join a board, and I try to join boards that are rooted in community and that I can help serve that kind of piece, like bring what I've learned as a nonprofit leader, as a food system leader to a table, development to a table, to a grassroots group. So that's how I got connected with the South Bronx Farmers Market. Is I'm on the board of South Bronx Farmers Market. I'm on the board of The Point. But even before that, being a community member, my son went to The Point when he went to school at Bronx Charter School for the Arts on Longfellow down in the South Bronx. So I was already like a community member of that Point community. So that's kind of how it just kind of turned around. Like years later, being in the food system, it helped me once again connect in a way and to kind of give back in a different way. Similar with the South Bronx Farmers Market, I know Lily, who started the market, Lily Kesselman, through our work and food justice and our stuff at Just Food. And she knew that I knew the community well, or I was from the Bronx, and asked me to join the board. So yeah. So I don't work there, but I'm on the board there. But it's interesting. It all kind of funnels into the work, and I think how I stay informed and grounded as well.
Listen, folks, when I was working in the Bronx, when I was thrown into the Bronx, because, you know, I'm a Brooklyn girl, I don't know nothing about the Bronx, right? Look, Qiana connected me with so many people in the Bronx. Like, so when she's out here saying, like, grassroots, she knows the community, like, literally, she knows the Bronx.
Thank you.
Real talk, real talk. So you also do some work with the Coordination Committee of the Civil Society Mechanism for the United Nations. What are you doing over there?
Yeah, trying to get some trips to Rome. No, yes, and doing important food policy work. Yeah, it all, like, over time, it all is kind of connected. And I again, like, when we talk about food systems or my work, I started to see, like, the broader my work got, the more connected it really is. And so doing work around policy, the opportunity to kind of amplify the experience of, you know, doing equity driven work in the Bronx or in the 5 boroughs, working with small to mid-scale farmers, POC farmers. These were, I think, experiences that kind of help, again, enrich or inform policy. So the civil society mechanism is a group of, you know, folks like us from across the world. So grassroots folks, food systems leaders, farmers, advocates, policymakers, nonprofit folks, like folks that kind of work on the front lines, work on the ground around the world to help inform the larger international policies around food systems, nutrition. So I started that like almost a year ago, and it does afford me the opportunity to travel when travel was a thing. But what it does also is it's really helped me connect with other grassroots frontline folks in other countries. And so when we kind of talk about, you know, work local, think global, like those connections, it really kind of helped me find ways to build solidarity and to inform policy. So it's not just from my perspective of this one circle, but are these things that are actually going to support the collective and the peoples. And I think for me, that's the civil society mechanism is so, it can feel very esoteric, but it also feels rooted because it gives me the opportunity to connect with fisher folk from, you know, Africa, and, you know, folks on the youth from Brazil, and every, you know, other folks doing grassroots work, and to really build solidarity to see what they're doing in their lands with their peoples, and how do we build together to really influence like the larger scheme. So I want to really find ways to have impact and connect and have the genuine change that we want to see. And I've learned, or I've been fortunate enough to connect it from the hyper local to the international and everywhere in between. So I don't want to just sit, you know, at home, and I don't want to just speak. I want to be able to still stay rooted and connected in the work and see how I can like support folks.
Why is it important that we buy local food? Why is it important that I try to buy my fruits and vegetables from like a local, like a vegetable stand, as opposed to a big supermarket.
Yes.
So can you just tell us a little bit about what we can do? What small things can we do as a community, as a people, to impact food systems? And is it just buying local?
No, I mean, I think local is a good place to start, but I think to me, it's like thinking about local, regional, and cultural. And like, can we, you know, are we trying, how do we put our principles around equity into the choices we make around food? So I think folks can take big steps and they can take little steps in doing that. And I hope that the work that I do, as well as other folks on the ground, is building opportunities to make that happen for folks, even if this isn't your job. But we're building an economy and a community that wants to support all of us and each other. And food just be one part of that. So I think I personally think there's an importance to local, because it builds a resiliency in your community, like your natural and built environment. It connects you to farmers and producers and value-added products, so businesses, that either are reflective of you or growing good food, and you have that power and that access to each other. So you're helping them do good work that's environmentally good, that's culturally good, that's socially good, that's just healthy for your choice. Like, that's your choice. I believe in the power of choice, and I believe we all should have that choice to grow, buy, and sell the healthy food that we want and build the resilient neighborhoods and communities that we want. And I think we can't just do that in silos. And I think if we start with our community and then start with our regional connections, then it starts to become clear about how we can connect beyond our region. So when we talk about doing it global, it's not then I just have to then automatically jump into this capitalist system. It's like, wait, how do we feasibly connect to, I want to know where my food comes from. I want to be able to say, in transparency, I want to support that business. So we always kind of talk about, support a Black business, support women business, support ownership. If food is also a way that folks can do that. So just like we like to go to the restaurant that we like or that's Black owned, there are ways that we can support each other in our food, our whole food, the food that we take home to cook, the food that, we, take home and have at dinners and events, socially distanced events and stuff. So we have a power in that. And that doesn't just connect to our plate. It connects to who is growing around this. Are there community gardens that are offering a place of respite as well as a place of growing in my community? We all deserve that. That shouldn't come in just because a neighborhood is gentrifying. We should be able to stay in our community and support, and we deserve that. We deserve green spaces. So I think, to me, the food connection or the action can be as simple as supporting your local community garden. Even if you don't get a plot and grow yourself, it's still making sure like folks that are in the community can have access to that. And you feel like you have access to it. Like, go to it, get to see your neighbors. These are good, healthy, constructive ways to build community. Get to know your neighbors. In terms of like buying food, like healthy food access, it's not just healthy for your nutrition, which is important. It's also like, how was that grown? Did it have to fly or come in a truck? Like, we talk about diabetes, we talk about asthma rates, but sometimes we don't break it down to like, well, that's how my food got here. So if you're, trying to minimize carbon footprint, or you want like nature, or you want to address climate change, like a small step is finding out in your community, is there a farm stand, a community run farmers market? Is there a CSA? Is there, are there ways that people are already building community around food and know the farmers that they're doing it with? Wow. And then you are now supporting healthy business. You're supporting healthy food consumption, but for yourself, but you're also supporting this business. And then you're working in collective with other folks. And I think, for me, and I think some other folks, people find like food then becomes no longer a weapon, or food doesn't just become a place of comfort, that food actually can be a place of power, and in a power of not just an individual power, but a collective power. So not just me as a single mom, and not just me making sure my kid eats well, but I want my neighborhood to be good. So I want to know what's coming in my neighborhood, and I want to be a part of making that decision of what's coming in my neighborhood. And I want to be able to push back if I don't like what is coming in. So food can be like that way of connecting where, again, you don't have to be a policy wonk. You don't have to watch CNN all day, every day. Many of us are privileged enough to eat food every day. And the folks that don't, there are ways that we can work with each other to make sure that that also gets addressed. Like food insecurity, and not just one night and one day. What I really believe in my work, which is, I think there's immediate need, but for me, it's about viability. And how do we connect together so we don't have to keep going back to charity? How do we go together where I have the option, you have the option to use your currency where you choose to use it, and we help bring that option to ourselves. So if I want to go to a grocery store, I want to go because I feel fully empowered to go. But if I want to go to the farmer's market, I want to feel fully empowered and that it be accessible to not just me. So how do I play a role in that? So for me, it became part of my job or livelihood to do it on a community level, a professional level, and a personal level. But I think anybody who feels like food is a right can take these steps in terms of where and who you buy food from. Why do you make those choices? But it can maybe connect you to a little bit more of the grassroots policy, because then you're like, wait, this has some power. But I have power when I work in community with other folks. And if we have power, then we should not only change what's happening based on our dollar and based on what's coming in our community, but what's the policy that informs that happens or doesn't happen? Can I get engaged in that too? Community, do I run for a community board? Do I want to be on my block association? Do I just want to join a CSA or a farmer's market and support that? So those are like some immediate ways that folks can do it. And that like has longer term impacts, because it's not just I got mines or I'm going to get my snack for the day, but it's like, this is what's going to be in my community this season and next season, or this is the policy that I now understand how it connects to this. I want to change that. I want to change food access. I want more farm stands in my community. I want more farmers like the farmer I know. I want more Black businesses. I want more Black farmers. Hey, what about that?
Yeah.
I want that. And then you start to see, well, if I want to support Black food, where are they getting their food? Are they getting, if I go to a restaurant, are they, that's where it starts to connect. So for me, it was like, oh, it goes beyond just this bunch of kale or this onion, but this bigger system of support or fighting for it. And I think, with Black farmers too, when you start talking about that, you can't help but see yourself in their work. You can't help but see yourself want to be that and support that, even if that means connecting to land, and policy is all connected to that.
It is.
You can't get away from policy.
So you know what? I feel like I want to ask you, a young person who is an activist, because we got like these Gen Zers, they are out here trying to save lives, right? Like they are about it.
Yes.
How
do they get in?
What's the entry point, right? Like if you're out there on the front lines and you're doing activist work, how can you make a living doing that, right? Because that's really what parents want to know, right?
Yes.
So the kid is an environmental justice person. They want to save the planet. How do you make a living doing that? Because I feel that your work is about saving the planet, and in all of the bigness of it. It really comes down to saving this world for us and for the next generation. So how can young people be a part of that and make a living in that?
Okay. Good question. I would say if they want to stay in the activist lens, there's, like any sector, there's easier ways to do it and there's hard ways to do it. Like if you wanted to, I'm going to focus on like the ways that feel rooted in community. Okay. So as a mom myself, I would say you can do activist work in different ways. You can be a practitioner of it, like in the food space. Some people want to grow, and that is their activist work. Okay. You can become a community organizer. There's organizing work, there's training work, there's advocacy work, there's facilitation work. There's also just business. I think sometimes people think that folks that do activist work, we just like, live in some like revolutionary land and, bills just get paid. Like, no, like there's actual businesses, unincorporated groups and incorporated nonprofits, for-profits. There's a business structure to doing activist work at times, and those are job opportunities. Now, I'm not going to say it's easy work. I'm not going to say it always pays well. But what I can lift up is, I think there's work around advocacy, the intersection around law, the intersection around wanting to work on policy, whether in government or outside of it. There are, organizations that have paid jobs for different levels of work, grassroots work, internal work, accounting for this. I think even being somebody who does data and research and science, I think sometimes we think they're very separate. You can be somebody who does accounting, who does finance, who does research. If your parents are very happy with you being in school for years at a time, you can get research. We don't, these are scientists, science ways. Like there are jobs that intersect with activist work, building, infrastructure, business, or the infrastructure of your organizing to actual jobs. So there are practical jobs. I think it's just looking at it at being a sector, just like you look at, the culinary field as a sector or education as a sector. I don't think it just means you have to only be an organizer. Yeah. Sorry.
No. So
is that helpful?
No, it's very helpful. It's very helpful. So how do we support Qiana? How do we support your work? Can we follow you? Are you on the socials?
I am. How do you support my work? Well, to get to learn more about me and my work around food and race and policy, check me out on my website, QianaJMickie.com. So QianaJMickie.com. People can follow me much easier on social media, on Instagram and Twitter at Ragamickie. That is my handle. And I like to talk a lot and share, so there'll be different links and resources. I do trainings often, so I'm always trying to promote trainings of my own and other folks. So again, opportunities for folks to gain more experience and gain opportunity. Something I wanted to share too around jobs is, a lot of times people ask me like, how do I be you, or how do I do your job for a living? And they feel like they have to go to college or get a certain degree in order to do it. Again, my degree is in marketing. I did not know 12 years ago that this would be what I did for a living, let alone something that I did. So I think it's really finding ways to get rooted in your community, learn about what makes you passionate, connect to that piece, find ways to volunteer, find training opportunities, and then gain that experience, do the due diligence of learning from folks that come before you, from ancestors and elders, and folks that have built that pathway, so then you can like build on that. But Ragamickie, sorry.
You know what, Qiana? This is perfect, and we are going to leave it right there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Happy to connect with anybody who reaches out.
Thank you so much, Qiana. Thank you. So some takeaways are, Policy leadership needs to be comprised of people who are impacted by the problem. Those impacted need to have the most decision-making power. 2, your skills are transferable. You can use your skills to infiltrate and dismantle existing systems to build new systems of change. And 3, there are so many jobs that intersect with activism, such as data, research, law, and community building. You should hone in on your passion, remain rooted in your community to bring about change. Thank you so much, Qiana, and welcome to the Liberated Success family. And so, I took off last week, had a lot of things were happening. My aunt passed away, my dog died, and I literally just didn't have the energy to put this together, to edit. And you know what? In 2021, I'm going to take more time to feel, to rest, so that I can do impactful work. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to feel, rest, and then work. So, no major updates this week. Just starting to feel like myself again. So if you find our work informative, impactful, and important, show us some love with a donation. The link is in my bio on IG and Twitter. It's the first comment on Facebook. And if you're listening on the podcast, you can make a donation via listener support. And don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the podcast, follow us on IG and Facebook and Twitter. And be sure to check out the website, liberatedsuccess.org/resources is where we have a repository of community resources for high school, college students, parents, educators, and job seekers. Thank you for watching and listening all the way to the end. We will save ourselves. Wear your mask, wash your hands, physically distance, and all Black Lives Matter. See you next week. Bye.
Day to work, one whole day to play. Come on, everybody.